Hello from Oslo and welcome to today's afternoon tea conversation. I'm Ingeborg from Women in Global Health Norway. With this series, we're highlighting some of our members, and today I'm having a chat with our founder, the lady that made it all happen, Andrea WInkler. Andrea now lives in Germany, but luckily she has continued to be closely connected to our chapter as both a member and our special counselor. Furthermore, she's professor at the University of Oslo, and she's co-chairing the Lancet Commission on One Health based at the university's Center for Global Health, a center that Andrea led until only a couple of years ago. She's the co-founder and leader of the Center for Global Health at the Technical University of Munich. And there are so many other things that I could have mentioned. Indeed, Andrea, you are a global health star, and I'm so thrilled to see you here today.
Well, thank you so much, Ingeborg. It's just really, it's so nice to be invited, and thanks for all the flowers. But it has always been so nice to work with you and the team. So I just feel that this is, I feel very comfortable, and that this is just our usual chit chat and conversation. So thank you very much again for inviting me to this.
Yes, that is true, Andrea. It is a true pleasure to work together with you. And I do miss you in my day-to-day, but we're still very close and we do work a lot together. So to start off and give our viewers some insight into who you are, let's start by you telling us a little bit about the personal history that led you to where you are today.
Yes, no, thank you for this first question. Of course, that's a classical question where women could slightly get off track and off the tangent, so to say. Yes, so to keep it short, I'm a neurologist by training, and I decided very early on to become a neurologist, but it was more like by serendipity, because I was offered a job and I always felt I wanted to go and work in Africa. And in fact, I really studied medicine, and I decided very late, just when I was already like 19, 20, after I got my baccalaureate, I really wanted to do medicine. It was a very spontaneous decision. I wanted to do medicine, to study medicine, to be able to work in Africa. So this is also, I started out in neurology, what I eventually did. So I went to northern Tanzania, interestingly enough, a Norwegian missionary hospital, that then somehow, it wasn't that connection, but somehow I was brought back to Norway later on, as Ingeborg said, as the director of the Center for Global Health at the University of Oslo. So then I really went, after 2 years in neurology and a PhD, I went back in my mid-30s to work on the ground in Africa, in the refugee camps, but also in that missionary hospital led by the Olsen family from the southern part of Norway. And that, of course, was quite an experience. Personally, I felt that I was at the right place at the right time. So I felt very connected, and I felt that I was called to this work. So I spent 3 years, almost 3 years there. And of course, then, I was then like 38, and coming back was a bit of a challenge. And maybe this is interesting to point out also for our young colleagues, that I had no idea how this would be perceived. When I told my previous bosses that I will go out and work in Africa, they said, oh, well, we don't know whether you can come back at all. So I said, well, I do it irrespective, and I just go, because otherwise, if you always listen to what people say, you may regret. And I still think of that time in Africa, the almost 3 years, it gave me so much for my personal development. And also it was the basis of all the research work that I then developed later on. So when I came back, I definitely met resistance. But there are always conveners. There are blockers and there are conveners. So I went with the conveners, and I was really received very nicely by my still senior and the dean of the medical school here in Munich. And he basically said, you know, I support what you do, but definitely that it wasn't easy, and I don't have time to disentangle that journey. It wasn't easy to come with like a half-finished specialist degree. So I already had some time in neurology. I had a PhD, but then I interrupted this career. And in Germany, this is really something that people don't like seeing. But so I found my buddies, more or less. And then also as a woman, I really met the resistance. I realized that if I had been a man, it would have been easier, and also easier to be heard. Easier to be heard. That was very often where I felt, okay, and I was only heard when I came with third-party funds and other achievements. But to cut a long story short, it has worked out. I'm now a professor for global One Health. I was then very well received also as the founding director at the University of Oslo, where I spent I think 5 years, very fruitful and productive 5 years together with Ingeborg. And then went back and established back home here, established a similar construct at the Technical University of Munich. Maybe I shall stop here, Ingeborg. There's much more to be said, but this is pretty much my personal journey to really connect the work on the ground, also what is deemed unattractive for a high-level research, and then bridging that quantum leap or performing the quantum leap to put what we have learned on the ground in sub-Saharan Africa high level, so that we could get support, advocacy, and lobby for funding to basically then feed back into our groundwork. So yes, it was difficult, and it's not like these days where young women or women in general do have support and they can access networks. So basically I had to establish those networks myself. And now really I stop here, Ingeborg. Thank you.
Yes, and you have really managed to, you do have some huge grants with the both the EU and the German Ministry of, you help me out here, Andrea.
Oh, the German Ministry of Education and Research. You're right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So you are still you're still very active in Africa.
That's right. So I have kept this link, and that to me it will always be there. Of course, it changes over time, but for me it was important not just to go out and realize myself, but to bring it back and to develop something that is sustainable. Right? And to be heard. And just coming back from the World Health Summit, I can tell you, Ingeborg, we are heard. We are heard.
And that was actually my next question, because I wanted you to talk a little bit about your current affairs and what you're currently doing. Yeah. And of course, I know that you have just been in Berlin. So tell us a little bit about that.
So basically what has, I have worked very generally on the ground, but I was then already in my neurology training. So I always had an emphasis on non-communicable diseases, epilepsy, neurology. But when I worked in Africa, I realized that 20%, or we found in one of our research, that 20% of people with epilepsy had neurocysticercosis, which is the pork tapeworm in the brain. And then I made the connection to the neglected tropical diseases, from there on to One Health, then through my work in Oslo into digital health, and also through my work in Oslo, combining and including, interlinking the social sciences. And this also are our focal points when it comes to topics in the Center for Global Health at the Technical University of Munich. But of course, with One Health, I'm very, very connected still, also through my professorship, which is Global One Health, through you, Ingeborg, the Center for Global Health and the University of Oslo. So the connection is there, and these are now, so basically I'm involved in those topics, and those topics also are heard, especially, and of course we have to be honest, it is through the pandemic that One Health has received that leverage. And now, just hot off the press from the World Health Summit, we had really high level attendance. Even the German Chancellor was there in person, various ministers, Dr. Tedros all the time. Now it's a joint, a combined conference with WHO, and One Health has been named explicitly very often, almost in all of those speeches. And that, and it's not down to me, it's not my merit, but it's mobilizing the community, and it has actually infiltrated the policy talks.
But you're part of it, right? I mean, you are very much part of it, and you are
my team and I and you and John, and of course others from the Lancet Commission. We are part of it, and we are beating the drums. Yes, yes.
Absolutely. Well done. Let's go further. Are there any defining moments in your life that you feel shaped you as the leader you are today?
I was thinking about this question, of course. It's very difficult to say. It's that defining moment when I decided on the spur of a moment that I want to study medicine. It was one summer evening, I just knew it was medicine. And it just came to me.
How old were you?
19. So it was after school, right? All my friends knew what they were going to do. I was the only one. And then I decided overnight. And that is to me, and I never regretted it up to now. But and another deciding moment was really also my mentors, but we didn't call them mentors then. So there is a very kind gentleman who unfortunately died, but he was my supervisor for my PhD, my main supervisor in London, and he shaped me, and also another consultant that I worked with. I had to do psychiatry. It was old age psychiatry, a very nice colleague, my senior. And he told me, "Oh, Andrea, if you just move along the speed you're moving now, oh, you will become a professor very soon." And I was not even thinking of myself as being able to achieve. So those two, they really believed in me. And those discussions I had with them, there were not many deciding moments, I would say.
So you told me once that you miss your patients very much.
Yeah. Yes.
What made you decide to go from seeing patients to doing what you're doing today?
Yes, it was basically, it was really a time issue, and also to be able to fully dedicate, to focus on one thing. And I mean, I haven't seen patients now since 2016 when I came to Oslo, but of course I'm thinking of maybe going back like 1 day per week or half a day per week to see patients. All of this is still possible, but there's so much out there in those topics that I just mentioned, especially in the One Health field, global One Health field, that needs to be tackled, interesting stuff that can't wait. So I simply don't find the time, but the door would be open. And yes, right. I mean, the first 2 years I was quite relieved to not having to deal with, it was a lot of, in neurology, it's a lot of disability and a lot of dying and palliative care. So I was really, really quite relieved for 2 years not having to deal with this, despite it's very close to my heart. But after 2 years, I started missing patients. And I still have some patients that I consult, but, that is pro bono, but there are not many.
Mm. So you brought Women in Global Health to Norway in 2018, and you made sure that we were the second chapter in the movement after Germany. You're, of course, also very active in the German chapter. What attracted you to Women in Global Health as a movement, and how do you see a place for a network like this in Norway? I mean, indeed, how do you see any different, do you see any different challenges for women in global health here in Norway and in your home country, Germany?
Yeah, no, thank you, Ingeborg. Very important questions, especially the latter one. You know, I think I was just basically, this was one evening, it was the launch of the German chapter, and Sabine Ludwig had this as a mentoring theme with Professor Ilona Kickbusch. And they just threw the ball and said, so who wants to found the next chapter? And I was very engaged then, Ingeborg, with you in the Center for Global Health, and I just knew how permissive the environment in Norway was with regards to the female agenda. So I thought it was just, again, you know, I'm a person that don't think things over for too long. I just jump at things. Maybe then at times it's too much, but I just jumped at it. Also, Ilona was there. I didn't know Sabine then, but Ilona, she's always been very inspirational to me. And I just said, okay, well, we can try. And I basically caught the ball. And I mean, it has worked out tremendously well. And now you're leading it, and of course, together with Bernadette Kumar, but you have been leading it on your own for quite a while, Ingeborg. Before you and I were co-leading, it has turned out really as a good idea. And I'm glad I caught the ball, but it was, again, a very spontaneous decision, but Norway has a lot to offer. Your second question is the German and the Norwegian agenda, they are a bit different. So Germany is still very, very hierarchical. And again, I think this was obvious during recent meetings. Although the common joint consciousness, the mindset is changing, and Norway is far ahead. But even in Norway, there are still inequalities, and there are other questions that need to be tackled. So first of all, I really think that combination, Germany, Norway, and the link that I could play and do play at times is important, but also what Norway has to offer to inspire others and maybe to buddy with other chapters that haven't come that long way yet. And also, Ingeborg, if you remember, when we tried at the beginning, the doors were not so wide open, right? So we also had to do our homework and to push some doors open. But then, as we had some critical mass, then basically we were quite attractive for others to join. So it wasn't that Norway was, oh yeah, yes, here we are. So it was also met with a bit of skepticism in the beginning. And that was quite interesting, I think. But we are way beyond that, of course.
Absolutely. And I certainly remember that. So, Andrea, finally, and to our especially younger viewers out there, what would you like to say to the younger you? What words of wisdom would you have liked to hear yourself when you decided on your route?
Yes. And that was also a difficult one, because the times were what they were, right? We didn't have those networks, etc. So it's so difficult to say what I could have done differently. I think in terms of my career, I needed to try, and I went quite a few byways, but I had to walk those byways to realize what the main track is. So maybe I would take less byways, but to say this in retrospective is just difficult, right? Because how can you find your main track if you don't take the byways? And definitely the byways needed to be explored by us, you know, the first women, so to say, in global health. So these days it's much easier to find the main track for young women. That was, so basically, if you know what you want to do, walk the main track. But there's no harm to also explore byways. But if you can, walk the main track. And then also, that's on a very personal note. I would say have children, have them earlier, have many, and look for a permissive environment, which definitely is not Germany, or it wasn't then. So I had my only son late, and that is something, now that he is an adolescent and the little child is gone, I would really advise myself and trying to go for a family earlier and having more children. But this is just how it is, right? And I'm very grateful for my only son. I'm very grateful for him as well.
Of course. Andrea, our time is up already. We could have talked for hours, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for sharing your story and reflections with us. It's really a privilege to be your friend and to have you in our chapter. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ingeborg. Same here. And thank you for all the time and all the years. And there are many to come, many more years to come.
Thank you to our viewers for tuning in, and we look forward to welcoming you back for the next afternoon tea conversation with Women in Global Health Norway. Goodbye.